If you've ever owned cats, dogs, fish, or even insects, there's a chance you've seen what happens when they give birth. It's all natural and normal-ish for the most part, but there are some animals that reproduce in mind-blowing and often utterly bizarre ways. From popping out babies out at the tops of trees to virgin deliveries, let's take a look at some of the most incredible births in the animal world. Hammerhead shark. Giving birth underwater is a risky procedure, and the predatory kings and queens of the ocean, aka sharks, have evolved with this in mind. For sharks, birth can happen in surprisingly varied ways. Although some sharks lay eggs, about 60% of shark species are viviparous and give birth to live young. Among the live birthers is the hammerhead shark. You might think this seems impossible considering the shape of that noggin, but hammerhead sharks are born almost torpedo-like, and their iconic head shape develops later in life. Litters usually contain 12 to 15 pups, and greater hammerheads can give birth to up to 40. But the truly astounding thing about hammerhead sharks is that they don't need males to reproduce. That's right. When males are in short supply, hammerhead sharks are capable of virgin birth. During the process known as automatic parthenogenesis, an unfertilized egg inside the mother is activated to behave as a fertilized egg by a small cell known as the sister polar body. From that point, it develops into a little shark pup. Because no new genetic material is added into the mix from a father shark, the baby is born at a considerable disadvantage due to its lack of genetic diversity. In a nutshell, it's more likely to be a slightly derpy fish. If that's the implications of a virgin birth, this raises a couple of questions about Jesus. Freaky flatworms. If bizarre, mind-blowing births are your thing, allow me to introduce you to the planarian flatworm of the Turbellaria family. This little wiggler has the impressive ability to reproduce both sexually and asexually. When flatworms are feeling sexual, they'll bind together and, as they're hermaphroditic, fertilize each other's eggs. But asexual reproduction is where it gets weird. Planarian flatworms use a method called transverse fission. This is where the worm fixes the tail portion of its body onto a surface and then pulls forward until it tears itself into two. Sounds grisly, but get this. Each half then completely regenerates to form two new worms. That's right, it can breed by literally tearing itself apart. The tail portion can regenerate a brand new head in little than under 7 days. Pretty incredible, right? It takes me almost that long to iron a shirt. Scientists have been fascinated by these worms for decades, and it's thought this reproduction process might hold the key to superhuman medicine. Either that or having twins in the future is going to get real weird. Humpback whale. This is the majestic humpback whale, and this is some of the first footage ever captured of a humpback whale giving birth. This bust-sized sea mammal is going through something known as a fluke birth, where the calf is born tail first. Usually a humpback whale calf will gestate for almost 12 months, and at birth it can weigh up to 1.5 tons and measure up to 15 feet long. But that's not all. Humpbacks are known for undertaking some of the longest migration journeys on the planet. With typical yearly migrations of up to 16,000 miles on average, there's no stopping just because a baby is born. Once the calf is delivered in the warmer equatorial waters, it's business as usual. The long migration back home, either south or north depending on the mother's preference, begins immediately. The baby is born swimming, but will sometimes ride on the mother's back and head to catch a breather. Now that's a whale of an upbringing. Sloths. Do you ever find yourself wondering, golly, childbirth sure seems easy. Is there a way to make it more difficult? No? Well, it seems like sloths take that stance because they regularly give birth at the tops of trees. Sloths are notorious in the animal kingdom for their painstakingly slow speeds and minimal locomotion. To illustrate the point, they only tend to leave the safety of their home in the trees around once a week to defecate. Even the need to give birth won't force these bizarre hanging mammals onto the ground. So after 6 to 12 months of gestation, they're forced to give birth in the treetops. This means the baby doesn't always make a graceful entrance. Usually they use their front limbs to grasp the mother's stomach fur and pull themselves out. In other instances, however, the strength of the umbilical cord is what keeps the baby from becoming a pancake. Eventually, though, the little abseiler's pre-equipped claws and instincts allow it to latch onto the mother for the next 6 months. With a stuntman birth like that, I'd say sloths are way more hardcore than most people give them credit for. Suriname toads. For those with a fear of small irregular holes, toads, or pregnancy, welcome to hell. What you're looking at is the live birth of a Suriname toad, starring in one of the most skin-crawling videos on the internet. When these amphibians found in Brazil, Suriname, Bolivia, and Peru mate, the female releases 60 to 100 eggs, which the male fertilizes on top of her and then pushes them into her back. After 2.5 months, the eggs then hatch while they're embedded in the female's skin. Slowly but surely, each newly formed toad pops out of the female's back. The female then sheds her skin and is ready to begin the cycle all over again. This stomach-churning gestation method is a clever evolutionary tactic that prevents clusters of unattended eggs being eaten by predators. So if you ever thought your parents were overprotective, remember, it could have been so much worse. Seahorse. Sometimes a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do, including giving birth. Seahorses are kind of famous for the fact that they're one of the few species on Earth where the male gestates the pregnancy. During mating, the female will transfer her eggs over to the male's brood pouch. Once closed, the pouch becomes a fertilizing environment for the male's sperm, which gestates from 10 to 25 days. The eggs then hatch inside the pouch and the male's contractions start, which is a sign that it's time for him to anchor himself down. Through a series of spasms that can last up to 12 hours, he can push out up to 2,500 young, depending on the species. That seems like a huge number, but the rate of these youngsters making it to adulthood is less than 0.5%, as they're immediately abandoned. Birthing so many ensures at least some of them will grow into adulthood. What's even more amazing is that immediately after the father gives birth, he's ready to carry another batch of eggs. He might not stick around long after they're out and about, but I'd say the seahorse still wins Father of the Year. Jawfish. Getting something stuck in your teeth is the worst, especially when it's your own child. Wait, what? Like the Suriname toad, the Caribbean banded jawfish keeps its young superficially in its body during gestation, storing them in its mouth. And in the same vein as the seahorse, it's the males who get this bizarre parental duty. The female releases her eggs and, once fertilized, the male keeps them in his jaws to prevent predators from preying on the vulnerable unhatched young. During this 7 to 9 day brooding period, the male can't eat anything. So by the time all of his contractions are over, the soon-to-be fathers are often critically underweight. It's pretty impressive that even in the face of starvation, they can resist the urge to chow down on their home brew. It's all worth it though, because in one birthing session, the male can release up to 500 eggs into the surrounding waters. While most kids can be a handful, the banded jawfish's little swimmers are one hell of a mouthful. Centipede. Birth is a natural and beautiful part of life. Unless you're watching a centipede give birth and care for its newborns, in which case you'll need to fight the urge to kill it with fire. Most centipedes lay their eggs into cracks in rotting logs or in the soil. Depending on the species, they can lay anywhere from 15 to 60 eggs in this way, which take around 30 days to hatch. But in an unexpected turn of maternal behavior, the majority of females will tend their eggs closely, curling their bodies around their brood to protect them. This practice continues after they hatch, which is undoubtedly way worse to look at. The young caterpillars are prone to being infected by fungi, so the mother will constantly rotate around them, grooming them to ensure they reach adulthood. But it's not all love and cuddles. If the female is disturbed or senses serious danger, she'll sometimes abandon the brood, or worse, go full Hannibal Lecter and eat her young, as if this crawly wasn't creepy enough. Pangolins. Despite looking cute, these creatures found in Asia and Africa, and formerly known as pangolins, have a defense mechanism that makes them a formidable opponent. Like countless video game characters, their special ability is rolling into an armor-plated ball. Pangolin scales are made of keratin, like big, sharp, massively upgraded human fingernails, and catching this little mammal at the wrong angle can prove extremely painful. Even nature's apex predators have a hard time cracking them open. But with scales so tough, how do they give birth without tearing themselves apart? Well, for starters, with a gestation period of around 5 months, they typically only give birth to one pango pup at a time. When the 6-inch pup is born, it comes ready with a full set of scales, only they're a little soft-boiled at birth to make it easier on the mother. After a day out in the world, though, the scales miraculously harden to almost the same strength as an adult pangolin's. They grow up so fast. Snakes. Is it just me, or did school teach us that reptiles lay eggs? If that's so, then how is this possible? You're currently seeing a boa snake giving live birth to a whole nest of baby boa snakes. It's mind-blowing to watch, and even more so knowing that snakes can give birth in 3 different ways depending on the species. Oviparous species lay eggs with little or no embryonic development inside the mother. Viviparous species give live birth where the embryo is fully developed. Ovoviviparous species, meanwhile, are a hybrid. Ovoviviparous eggs are incubated inside the mother until the babies hatch and slither out, leaving the eggs inside the mother. Snakes that typically go through live birth include boas like pythons and anacondas, vipers like rattlesnakes, and sea snakes like horned and olive snakes. Gestation periods for these species range from 5 to 8 months, with broods of over 14 at once. That's right, a good portion of the snakes you might encounter could be wriggling with a dozen smaller versions ready to burst out at any moment. Jellyfish. How are jellyfish born? It's not a question many people ask or know the answer to, but the process is as impressive as it is alien compared to our own. While many jellyfish species can reproduce asexually, sexual reproduction is still an option for jellies who feel so inclined and are decked out with the necessary tools. Usually this begins with the male releasing his sperm into the water, which then swim towards a female and fertilize her eggs. Typically, the fertilized eggs will develop on the female jellyfish's oral arms for a short time before transforming into planula larvae. These are often smaller than a grain of rice, but they manage to navigate their way down to the ocean floor and settle there. Once they've latched onto a secure surface, they begin to develop into cylindrical, stalk-like structures called polyps. After a period that can last from several weeks to several years, the polyp buds, kind of like an alien flower, and releases what looks like miniature jellyfish. These are known as Ephra and are basically the baby versions of the jellyfish we know and love, hate, fear. Anyway, eventually these will grow into fully fledged adults in what's known as the Medusa stage, and the cycle begins all over again. It's kind of comforting, isn't it? If something as brainless and weird as jellyfish can reproduce, there's still hope for you yet.